Want to do it again next week? No? Oh, all right.
Because anyone in LA is gonna be there. I'm extremely rich. Hey girl, welcome to my house party. It's a giant mansion, baby. Don't slip on all my money. Yeah, there's a lot of models and some supermodels too. Don't touch my diamond fridge, it costs more than the country of Peru. Seduction is like a game of chess, and I'm the queen. Wait. Can't stop, won't stop, dancing deep into the night. It's a mansion party. Know that time is super tight. And if you're feeling naughty, we'll smoke champagne by candlelight. It's a mansion party. And later on the panda fight. You've really got to agitate the pandas to get them engaged in combat. They're very docile by nature. I laced their bamboo. Hey girl, heard you couldn't find the dance floor. Just walk right past the garden, go through the Spanish-French doors, turn right at the 7th bathroom, then a left at my laser car. You can ride my purebred stallion. If you hit my mode, you've gone too far. Take an upside-down left at the MC Escher stairs. Okay, the moment's halfway there. Can't stop, won't stop, dancing deep into the night. It's a mansion party. I bought a yacht just for tonight. And if you're feeling naughty, we'll smoke champagne by candlelight. It's a mansion party. Now let's watch two pandas fight.
Last week all over again. Let's get the hell out of here!
Can't stop, won't stop, non-stop, running for my life. It's a mansion party. I pray to God we all survive. And if you're feeling saucy, we'll grab some spears by candlelight. It's a mansion party. We're dropping pandas left and right. Send it down! Down! Party rocker!
Are we live? Yes, we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a nice classic Saturday stream. Hello, Mr. Teacher Man. Hello, Marciel. How are you all doing this pleasant Saturday? Hopefully pleasant. I know we got you guys spread out all over the place, but I just got back from doing a bit of shopping, and the weather where I am is fucking phenomenal that it ended up just kind of walking around for 40 minutes just to sort of stay out in the sun and the cool breeze and everything for just a little bit longer. Very excited. So, how has everybody's weeks been? And how are your weekends shaping up to be? Over here, I've got a very interesting Sunday planned, essentially. Unfortunately for me, my D&D campaign got canceled due to some scheduling stuff, but that means I have plugged on in for Sunday, finishing up the last few steps that I need for the chat dungeon to be ready. And once that's knocked out, I will be going around to the party that I have assembled and prepping for them to have a session 0, finish up building characters, and figure out an exact date for us to put together a real DnD stream for you guys. I walked my dog today. Hell yeah, Sour. Knock it out. Ooh, Love Doctor. Painting and recording my Valentine's message for my GF. Aww. Stream on Sunday? No, Sour Cake. Unfortunately, I'm using that day to finish up a few different things I have backlogged, including finishing the dungeon, so it'll be ready to go at an instant. I suppose we can see, but I don't know. We've got a few things going on Sunday, so probably won't have time for a stream then. But. And then bought a box of Yu-Gi-Oh cards yesterday. Hell yeah. Sadly, nothing of worth there. Then bought another box of minis that'll be painted as Valentine's Day gift. Damn, Love Doctor. Living up to your name, huh? Big Valentine's fan. That's exciting. I suppose that's a good PSA for today. Don't forget Valentine's Day, everybody. Technically, it is on Monday, though I know quite a few people out there are planning to celebrate on Sunday for some understandable reasons. Though I think that does coincide with the Super Bowl, right? Maybe I shouldn't have said that. I might get copyright struck for that one, but still. A lot going on this weekend, everybody. So make sure if you have any last minute purchases or plans you need to make, that you get those locked down before it's too late. Valentine's, are you mocking me? No. Super Owl. Yeah, Super Owl roosts tomorrow. God damn. Lol. But. Today, we are going to be rolling on into our third, and I think final, at least official, for this group of streams of learning Dungeons and Dragons. There are a lot of mechanics out there, a lot of class and subclass specific rules that many of you can get into, explorations of the rules for casting, of how certain spells do and do not work, of what the most common homebrew are, and how to homebrew your own exciting and dynamic rules into the game. A lot of this, however, I've kind of covered in past streams, some of which you can find on my YouTube archive. And ultimately, a lot of this is just sitting down and going over the rules and explaining some fringe cases, which I might be down for at a later point if you all are interested in looking into the finer details. But most of these rules tend to just come out in gameplay, things you just sort of learn through experience and honestly don't make for the most exciting or important parts of learning about stuff before you get into the game. Like 100% of the other Valentine's Day, I will be alone. I'm sorry, sour maybe. So then, what that means is today, the things we're going to be covering are important parts for playing Dungeons and Dragons. Things that help prep and build great stories, great interactions, and a fun time between players. But also, we're going to be talking about some stuff that can be uh, some of the most common areas that can lead to problems amongst players. Some behaviors or some things with lack of prep that can create some of the instances that lead to people's most common Dungeons and Dragon horror stories or any type of role playing game horror stories. So there's going to be a part in today's stream where we're going to be talking about some stuff that is some stuff that really comes down to being able to communicate with people, managing emotions, creating healthy conversations, and the stuff that might relate to some experiences people have had in the past. Because of that, I hope no, not quite murder hobo behaviors. Those are something that kind of will be covered about some things, but TLDR, don't get too horny with everyone, and a few other things about managing expectations, emotions, and the proper actions to take at times. But we'll be working our way into that. Luckily, we will not be starting ourselves off in the heaviest zones. Instead, today, we're going to begin with a discussion of what is Session 0. Session 0 is an event, something that gets talked about a lot, I think, for most role playing communities, more so in recent years. I think this is something that, to a degree, has happened long before the modern era of role playing, but has become a more official and term based system that, well, has become a very staple word now that even if people don't necessarily know what it is, recognize when people talk about it. So, Session 0, on the most fundamental level, as explained in the name, is a session or a series of sessions you have before you get into real gameplay sessions. Now, a Session 0 is meant to resolve, prepare, really just manage a lot of things before a game begins. So, what are some of the good rules to keep in mind? Some of the best ways to start and approach a Session 0. Session 0 is something that is almost always initiated by the dungeon master or whoever has begun the gathering process for getting a group together to play D&D. Again, this is most commonly the dungeon master, but not always. I highly recommend to anybody who decides to play any role-playing game with a group of people, if one is not brought up by the DM, to bring it up yourself. Session 0 is something that is very helpful for both players and DM. Session 0 is to get everyone on the same page, make characters and backstories. Yeah. So a lot of times, characters or backstories can be made outside of a Session 0, but 100% Little Pink. A Session 0 is about getting everybody onto the same page. So, step 1 then is making sure to broach the topic and get everyone interested in having a Session 0. This is something that should definitely be brought up casually, something everyone should find some time to get to, and you shouldn't expect it to run as long as a normal session, but getting people dedicated and committed to being attentive for at least a full hour of time is really helpful to starting a session 0. Now, things you can bring are firstly, bring character ideas. If you already have a character you've built ahead of time, backstory that you have, bringing it to session 0 is great, but you should be prepared for making edits to your character. Step 1 of a session 0 is to get everyone on the same page. So, as a player, if you bring a character, if you bring a backstory, step 1 your DM's going to have with you is talking about the world you're playing in. What parts of your backstory work or don't work. What type of group dynamic wants to be built, and what personalities will and won't work between characters. A discussion of, well, we're okay with having one player mismatch with the overall party's alignment, but as long as they understand the party's overlining alignment. I have a small list of characters already made, and I would use a session 0 to adapt the characters to the campaign setting. That is perfect. So the campaign adaptation is probably one of the easiest for a lot of people. Asking your DM, okay, what are similar events to what I have in this backstory that you need? But almost a more important part is learning the types of characters other players are making. If you learn, a lot of your players really want to play in a gray area. Characters like rogues that had bad backstories that want to be trying to be better but are going to mess up might help you understand that maybe bringing in the hardline pure law paladin who's going to crack down immediately on anyone even towing the line is not going to be very supportive of other character ideas unless you have that conversation with players. So if step 1 is bringing character ideas in line with the campaign setting and the DM's expectations, step 2 is bringing characters in line or to an understanding with other players' expectations and character designs. If another player is excited by the idea of having a friction between their two characters, that is something that is great to talk about in session 0. Hey, what kind of friction do you want between our characters to really build up some emotion? My character's going to get on you for any time they break the law or mess up. Oh, that's going to be great because I'm planning on always towing the line, but I want to make sure if I'm going to be pushing for things to go wrong, that there is someone in the party who's going to grab and pull my character back before he actually gets the party in trouble. Or sometimes characters are going to say, I really want to play around with some evil stuff. If it's something I have to hide from the party or it can be open with the party, that'd be great to know. Evil clerics or rogues or warlocks who have to fulfill a patron's desires is something really good to know beforehand. So players can adjust their expectations and understand when other players are going to be performing selfishly and understand that the player isn't doing selfish actions as a character just to be selfish, but to tell the story of their character. So, step 1 of a session 0 is to get everyone on the same page. Firstly, bring characters into the setting and get them lined up with the expectations of the DM. Second, get players in line with other players and characters. Figure out your party dynamic, what elements people are and aren't comfortable with. The next step then is to get the DM in line with the players and the players in line with the DM. Starting from the character level is very helpful, and I highly recommend always starting there because people can be a little more open and ready to discuss things they have to change about their expectations for their characters. The next thing, though, is expectations between the people. When a DM preps a campaign, they have a campaign style they like. Some DMs are really gameplay focused. They want to do Monster of the Week style, long dungeon delving, just building puzzles and events and encounters for the players to grapple, fight, unravel, and beat. Some DMs are really story driven. They have long arcing emotional plots planned out that they want people to stick within a certain level of rails to get them to those points and then to allow players to react within that. And some DMs have a really strong enjoyment of making just a vast world and letting their players sandbox run through it. A session zero, once characters are kind of set up and lined, is really good for having the DM explain what kind of campaign they want to run. I want set story beats. I want to be able to play with characters' established emotions. So there's going to be a degree of control that I, of the DM, want to take to make sure we move into scenes and to make sure that you guys can actually have some preset and understandable story moments to really play with the emotions of. I really want to just create the world and let you guys guide what happens. I'll do my best to react to what you're doing, as long as you can give me some understanding that I'm making a sandbox and I'm going to be basing what I build on you guys. So some sessions are going to feel light if I don't have a lot of info, and some sessions are going to be really heavy when you're moving into places that I have planned out and ready. These sort of conversations can help bring players in line with what the DM is building, expecting, and what the DM is going to have fun running and playing themselves. That is definitely an element that Session Zero is good at reminding players of, that your DM is playing as well. That there is a type of story dynamic that they know they will have fun with, that they are comfortable with, and that they will build for. There are some minor details as well, like if you're a cleric or a paladin, ironing out which god or pantheon they are, and actual beliefs of that god. Sessions, as in plural, sometimes there can be multiple session zeros. That doesn't happen too often, but it is something that can definitely happen, especially if there is more that needs to happen. If a session zero results in players and DMs realizing they all have very vastly different expectations, the very first session zero can be everyone put out those expectations, then we're going to break, everyone can mull over what everyone else said, and we can have a second session zero later on once we've all kind of mulled it down in our own heads to see maybe how things have shifted a bit. So once a DM kind of helps to bring players into their expectation, a really important and hard to do part is having players bring the DM into their expectations. Unfortunately, with the way that a lot of role playing games, especially Dungeons and Dragon, is designed, players can feel a bit uncomfortable, uncertain, or not so ready to try to tell the DM what they want, to make requests or to explain certain things. Where a DM might explain that they really want to do a very railroaded story-based game where the players will make the decisions, they'll drive like actions, but the DM really wants to have a strong control over what the story is going to be. Having, as a player, to tell the DM who's making the story for you, building the world, often organizing the event, telling them that you really would rather play something more free form can be uncomfortable and something a lot of people aren't super prepped for. To tell someone, hey, I know you're making all this, organizing all this, and this is kind of your pony show, but I just don't know if I can have fun going strictly with that. I'm wondering if there's a middle ground we can reach where both of us can have fun with this. because I really want something more free form where I can take a break from a set plot to go explore a place, or where I get to try out new things very quickly and don't have to sit on abilities until the story reaches that point. And while it can feel weird, I think it is one of the most important things is as a player to feel comfortable telling the DM what you do and don't want and what you will and won't have fun with. If you end up failing to tell the DM when they explain what their expectations are, how you might differ, then the DM will never shift from what they expect. They will push on ahead with what they have planned out until the moment anyone says anything to the contrary. And pushing aside your own wishes or interests is just going to lead to a compounding problem over time. So that's the fourth step in really a session zero, is having players communicate to the DM and bring the DM in line with their own expectations. So, once you establish characters, getting them aligned with the setting and aligned with party members, once you establish an overarching expectation of the game you will play, DM explaining what they're comfortable and what they'll have fun running and building, and players explaining what they want in order to have fun with the game itself. The next section is something people are, I think, more expectant of and generally more prepared for in a session zero, which is establishing the big no's, essentially, is the way I think of it. Honestly, if you go around online and you Google the term session zero or session zero sheet, you can end up getting yourself some print offs if you want of some topics to bring up with players that you want to see what they are and aren't comfortable with in their game. Especially with Dungeons and Dragons being kind of fantasy, medieval, violence and action based, there are a lot of topics that can quite easily come up, especially in homebrew worlds, that some players are or aren't okay with. In my own world of Deorum, slavery is a very big part of the story of the world. So I wanted to talk with my players about, are you comfortable with an overarching world that has both support and resistance to slavery, depending on which nation you're in? Once you figure out if your players are okay with that existing in the world, figuring out the degrees. Best example I can give is I explained to my players, I am very down for having the hardships of slavery on display in certain places. Great example is there is an empire of vampires which use coercion, charm, and threats to keep their own slaves in line. They make them do hard physical labor, they feed on them, and they kill them. However, I am personally uncomfortable going into certain other aspects of slavery that were very real. I'm likely not going to dabble or explore ideas of slavery when it comes to sexual behaviors. I am not comfortable narrating, building, or talking about that sort of stuff. I understand it's real and some cool story moments can be created from it, but it's not something I'm comfortable with. So those, even though they're real in real life, I'm not going to include in my stories. Another one was, while there are kids in slavery, I'm probably not going to explore a lot of the abuses, works, killings, and stuff of children. A little Bethesda of me, I know. It's just not something I'm comfortable with from a storytelling, narrating, building sort of direction. It's something I want to leave as the unspoken sort of thing within these types of story moments. You are free to imagine it. If you guys really want to free kids from a sort of situation like that, then sure. But I want to establish where my comfort zones are and aren't. Starting the big no conversations can be really good for players as well, as some players can bring up things that are just phobias, things that you aren't going to think of. The best example, and one I entirely fucked up in my own sessions, was I had a session 0, and I had a player who explained to me that they were really uncomfortable with eyeball mutilation, removal, stuff like that. They didn't like the visualization descriptions of eyes specifically being damaged. They said they're cool with characters who happen to be missing eyes, characters with old scars and stuff like that, but they weren't comfortable with narrative including that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, once we were dozens of sessions in, I had a scene involving a hag and her creating an object called a hag's eye, which I had at that point entirely forgotten my player's big no. They quickly, during that session as we were getting into it, told me that that was a thing that was dabbling into there. And I was able to allow them what needed to happen for me to speed the scene out of the way, try to focus off as much as possible, and to make sure they weren't put in an uncomfortable position to allow the scene to play out in the least painful way for them. So, the big no is a very important part. It's a part that, like I said, you can find sheets for, and I think those are useful if you're ever doing a campaign with people you aren't familiar with, people that haven't built up a sense of trust with you. With my players, I think, especially once I had started the conversation with the things I wasn't comfortable with, were very quick to explain to me things they also didn't want to explore, didn't want scenes for, or things that they wanted excluded for their own basic, the things that would make them feel uncomfortable and the like. I find sheets aren't super great in those situations where you already have trust with your players, as it more so turns it into a checklist and might lead them to not think of the things that are actually top of the mind for them. But when working with people that haven't built that trust and aren't necessarily comfortable volunteering up some stuff, who are so uncomfortable with certain topics, they don't even want to bring them up, a checklist can actually be very helpful to allow them to, with at least a feeling of anonymity, bringing up the topics they aren't comfortable with. And so, along with the conversation of the big no's, is establishing with your with your players. David, I was distracted by the persona to not notice the time. Ah, shit, crazy. How you doing? Is to make sure you establish with everybody that at any point they can call a pause, stop, or anything they need for the session if anything, like I had, begins to go into one of their big no's. So, through your session 0, bring everybody onto the same page. Get aligned with the setting, get aligned with your party. Build the overarching expectations. How do I fix my obsession with Kenku? You can't, Lotus. I'm sorry. That's there forever. Build your overall expectations for the story, both from the DM side and from the player side. Then discuss your big no's. The things that you are going to avoid in the story, in the narrative, in descriptions as a DM, or the things you really don't want to explore as a player, so that sessions can be run a lot cleaner and without people having to be concerned. Finally, with a session 0, a big thing I think to bring in line with players is two big expectations. The first one is kind of what I call the session point one, essentially. Letting your players know and establishing a pattern with your players that for the end of every session, you're going to have a very quick conversation with them again. I have my own point one session that I run every time with my players. I think Lotus knows what it is. That includes 3 set questions I ask every time that you establish during your session 0 so people will know what to expect to a degree. And you want to keep repeating those expectations to make sure as people are playing, if new things come up, they can let you know if things need to change or what may or may not be a problem for them. So for me, my point one session questions that are a staple are, did you have fun today? First question is a very broad one that I ask, but also a very important one. This is something that allows players to really let you know right away if they had a problem in the session or if it was a really good one. Once players kind of talk about if they had fun, just following that up with trying to get details. If they didn't have fun, what was the problem? Did they feel backgrounded or was there something that made it actively unfun? Was it something you did as a DM? Was it an interaction with a player? Or was it they were feeling off that day, but there's nothing to blame it on? It was just a bad day. This is also something important to know. Being able to tell if your player is just having a bad day could be really helpful for a DM to know to adjust story, adjust NPCs to not over focus on that player, to allow them to take a back seat so that they can support the other players while just mulling over their own emotions and feeling like they don't have to be stressed about the fact that they're feeling bad on D&D day. All humans are random as fuck. There's going to be a day if you play D&D weekly, there's just going to be a day that you feel bad, you feel angry, irritated, or uncomfortable on a day that happens to be D&D day. And communicating with your DM that today's just a fucked up day allows them to make sure they don't apply stress to you by forcing you to be super talkative on a day that you're feeling grumbly, to just make sure that you can have the lightest part of fun, that you can remain with everybody without feeling about stress to need to do something. So first question I ask is, did you have fun this session? The second question is a lot more specific. What happened today in the life of your character? This is a question I absolutely love asking for a couple of reasons. One, I love hearing players tell me what happened during the session. It lets me know immediately what they were paying attention to, what parts of the story really interested them, and also what they consider happening to their character. So the first thing, when you ask a player what happened today in the life of their character, they might simply say, we were at the tavern, we had a fight, we got a sword, and we went back and got paid. This lets you know that your player is very moment to moment, they're very action, 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 and that maybe your session wasn't super roleplay engaging for them, or they're not super interested in character engaging with the story. This can be positive or negative. This can help you build expectations for that player. This can let you know either, all right, I didn't do a good job engaging them in roleplay, or this is a character that when I get to focusing on them for a session, I just give them a really cool fight that is designed to show off their features instead of over engaging in their character's backstory. This lets you know what your player is interested in the session. Secondly, it allows players to basically communicate what they do and don't pay attention to. This is really useful if you are building intrigue, if you are doing a slowly building release of information, or if the players are trying to find something. This lets you know which of your hints are landing and which ones are going over people's heads. If a player tells you, oh, yes, we had a conversation with a bunch of riddle makers and they were talking about this group of protectors. And during that conversation, you made sure the riddlers kept talking about a tower. If none of your players bring up the tower, you know in future sessions, as much as you feel you foreshadowed it, if none of your players talk about it, if none of them mention it when they talk about what they heard, you have to internalize that essentially it has not been foreshadowed, which is something that can help you know what are good ways to foreshadow and what are not. Finally, asking players what happened this session in the life of their character can get them talking immediately about what they actually did or didn't enjoy about the session. While the first question of, did you have fun, can oftentimes be grumbled away, yeah, okay, it was okay, which can lead to wondering if it was really okay, if they're in a bad mood, unrelated, or if something bad happened. If you ask a player, what is everything that happened to your character today? This can lead to them saying, oh, well, this is really good. This was really good. This was really good. This wasn't so good. This was actually pretty bad. This allows players to give you an overall rating, saying the session was fun. But when they go into what happened, they get to tell you this part wasn't. This very specific thing that happened made me unhappy or made me feel like it wasn't as exciting. And this can be super helpful for allowing players to break things down a bit. And so finally, my third staple question that I ask every session is, do you have any questions or clarifications for me, the universe? This one is a bit for me. When I make a world, I do the sandbox build. I have events going on all over the world. I have thousands of years of lore, 70 different kingdoms. And so this allows players to get hints from me about where things are happening. A player can ask, oh, what ended up happening with that person we let go? And if I confirm with them that they're okay with spoilers, it lets me tell them, oh, yeah, they ran away to this city. Oh, that's where they are now. Okay. And allows them to lock away that information for later. This also allows players to ask me about what is coming up next, what are certain expectations I have, or if there's anything that they missed about an item, ability, or an event that happened. This is a moment where players being human can now check in. Hey, during that thing where we were being told riddles, they kept saying a tower. Was that important? Was that something I would have noticed? Is a great moment to tell them, yeah, no, that is definitely a weird thing they were talking about. You don't know what they were talking about. There's no tower nearby, but they seem to be really interested in it. These are great moments to help players really establish good pieces of information, learn a bit more about the world, and to clarify anything that might have been confusing that they didn't want to stop the session to explain. So that's sort of my session point one. It's something I do after every session if I can pull it off. There's some scheduling things that can prevent it, but it's something that helps me judge where my players are, learn what is or isn't working, and to clarify anything that is needed. It's sort of a very light repeating session 0 to make sure if anything new needs to be established or changed, but it's also a way for me to just subtly see what is or isn't working in a session and to start adjusting it on my own side. So then, with our session 0, We get everyone on the same page. We establish what is in line with the setting, what is in line with the party. We establish what the DM expects of the players and what the players expect of the DM. We establish what our big no's are and how we can stop a session if something uncomfortable begins happening. We establish what we will do from this point forward to keep things going, to keep up this session 0 expectation by developing a session point 1 for players. And finally, one of the biggest expectations I find for keeping a session going is talking with your players about the dreaded schedule. This is something that many people know of. This is one of the biggest memes in D&D, and yet it is one of the rarest things people seem to actually spend serious time on in a session 0. Not just establishing what days or anything like that, but that's a good starting point. And session 0 is a great time to bring up that we are all working together here. So we all need to be present as much as possible. So, what is the schedule? And the first thing to really think about is, can I commit to a weekly schedule? If you as a player know that, no, I can only do every other week, I can only do once a month, or anything like that, immediately telling people during your session 0, once you get to scheduling building, is amazingly powerful. Telling people, I really want to be involved in all of this, but I can only do every other week. Lets everybody rebuild their expectations around every other week and gets people into that mindset. Weekly or every other week can be just as fun, as engaging, or anything like that, as long as everybody knows what the best way to do it is going in. Next is building what days are going to work for people. I expressly make sure that I offer my players 2 days that they can choose from once a schedule has been established. Even if we always meet on Sunday, I have my players tell me, are you available Saturday or Sunday? Just in case any player has a Sunday they can't do, but it happens that everyone is available that is available that Saturday to play and interact. The final part for building a schedule and expectations is explaining to your players what will happen for missed sessions. Now, life happens, work happens, everything can happen to ruin a schedule, no matter how well built it is. So, establishing to your players, yeah, I want a week's head up. I want 3 days heads up. I need a certain amount of heads up to make sure we can get everybody in the know that there is or isn't a session with enough time to adjust to it. Telling your players, if you only let me know an hour before the session or something like that, and I can't adjust, I might have to cancel the session on really short notice. Or if you miss 3 sessions in a row without telling me why or what's happening, I'm going to have to remove you from the session. Scheduling is the number 1 killer for a majority of D&D games. People can't meet, so you miss 1 session, then a second session, interest dies off, and eventually the whole thing breaks down because one player's schedule became messed up and too many sessions were missed. Establishing with your players if there's other things you can do should a player be gone. Like we can do backstory sessions, we can do one-shots with different characters, or we can just play something else on that day, are all great ways to keep the pattern going. But you really need to know as a DM what you expect from your players for maintaining the schedule to ensure that it no one player gets in the way of everyone else's enjoyment. Yeah, Vulcan. Life is the biggest problem for a gaming group. It really is. So. Those are kind of, I think, the six main things I want to establish and do whenever building a session zero. Building expectations, getting on the same page, and establishing what is and isn't acceptable. So then, the next thing I want to talk about is honestly a pretty quick subject and something that I didn't realize for a lot of my earlier sessions. Something that it takes a few campaigns really for you to start to notice, realize, and play around with. And this is more of a misconception, mistake, or just not even a mistake. This is just something that is so natural to think as a player and as a DM that it can end up being just a staple for how you make stories when sometimes it's better to abandon it. And that's to always remember that role-playing games, D&D, is a collaborative storytelling event. A lot of people can end up, oh, myself included, just think of it as a storytelling event. And because of that, the number one thing that can happen for players and big time for DMs is the secret storytelling. The desire to hit everybody with the bombshell, the twist, the unexpected. This is honestly the juiciest moment in almost any story. The money shot of telling, of reacting, of everything happening. And that's why I think players and DMs get so, yeah, oh, they aren't going to expect this at all. Or I'm not going to tell anyone this part of my backstory so that way I can have the big reveal. There's something so juicy and desirable about the secret that a lot of DMs and quite a few players can forget about the collaborative part of collaborative storytelling. By not communicating with other players, by not letting people know what you want to do, can lead to moments where player expectation doesn't match the actual delivery. Some great like examples I can give are when you build a sudden reveal to your players, something that you wanted to be a big secret, and then it happens. An item was actually cursed. Someone they had trusted their whole time was actually using them. Anything like that. If players feel blindsided by the event, if there was no foreshadowing, if there was no expectation from it at all, they can feel less like, oh, this is a great story moment, and more like, oh, the DM lied to us to try to make something happen. The DM forced this event into existence. The DM doesn't listen to what I wanted to do, or the DM is trying to take an item away from us for no good reason. And on player side, a player wanting to keep their backstory entirely hidden, the classic, I sit in the corner and I tell no one what I'm doing type of character could lead to a lot of friction with players when players try to engage with a moment on watch. So, you never really talk about your family much. Can lead to a great emotional scene where two characters explain why both of them don't talk about their past much. but can be cut off by another character thinking, no, 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 I've already picked the moment I'm going to reveal this, and I'm not going to give anything. So I'm going to shut this moment down right now to maintain my secret. The other end of this, beyond the keeping the secret, is the bombshell moment. Characters revealing something to others. I never told you this, but I actually killed my own father. What people often forget about stories that have bombshell moments, sudden reveals, big twists that come up, is that the whole story was already written. Everyone's reaction to it was already built and ready to go by the time the story gets to that moment. And a player and a DM who has this reveal planned also has the reaction that they expect planned out in their head. Because of this, there can be a lot of letdown from the revealer when people don't react the way they expected. Oh, yeah, no, I figured. Or, oh, okay. Or even anger reacting to hearing you murdered someone, when what you wanted was everyone to basically react to the way of hearing that your pacifist character in their past not only committed murder but committed murder against a loved one, and you're hoping for people to react in a way of understanding, of concern, of pulling more information out of you. If they react with anger and disgust instead, if they sound disinterested or just accepting instead of the moment you're looking for, it can really kill the story moment. It can kill your excitement about your own character, and it can kill a lot of the great things that come about in collaborative storytelling. So, the number one thing this ultimately is coming down to is me saying, talk to your players as a DM if you want to do a big reveal. I'm not saying give away the plot line. Don't tell them exactly what it is, especially if you want some realistic information. But let the important people in that moment know, hey, next session is probably going to be really big for your character. There's going to be a character who is coming at them with a lot of information and is going to be very angry and accusatory. I want you to be prepared for that and to know kind of how you're going to react to it. As a player, talking to other characters like, hey, we've had a lot of like on watch sessions together and you've learned a bit about my character. Next session, I want us to go on watch together and I want to drop a really big bombshell on your character. But before we do that, I want to know, how are you going to react to learning my character did something kind of dark in the past? How's your character going to react? And how can I try to elicit a certain reaction from them? A pseudo planned out scene between players or between the DM and players or the party and a big event can create everyone knowing what to expect, reacting in more expected ways, and allows you to drive a scene emotionally into an amazing story moment. So just remember, as juicy as the secret is, as exciting as the twist or the reveal can be, you have to give your other storytellers something to work with beforehand. You have to make sure they're prepared and have the right expectations, or else 5 different storytellers are going to react entirely differently to one person's reveal, secret, or moment. And if everyone's pulling in opposite directions, the moment is going to go nowhere. Talk with your players, talk with your DM, prepare scenes, and play off of a slightly set up moment so that you can really know what to expect and deliver. The players have just as much influence on a story that the DM has. Definitely. This sounds like a huge cringe compilation. Marciel. People like to tell an intense moment in a story. Things could definitely feel very cringy looking out when you hear someone tell, the cliche setup of they killed their father did something in the past. Mommy daddy issues always are a little cliched in D&D and can seem a bit cringe from the outside, but when you're actually playing with friends and you get into one of those cool story moments, it can actually feel really interesting and exciting in the moment. And that's really what you're aiming for with collaborative stories. A moment needs proper setup as well. Killing your own father needs setup of your father being important in some way. 100% Little Pink. And talking with other people is the best way to know whether or not the setup is ready for you to pull the trigger. And now, as the transition from here into another topic is preparing for certain reveals like that can create highly emotional scenes. When you have built a scene where you're going to tell a character that when they met them, they were the one who killed the civilian that got them the job together. You've built up the expectation with your player that there's going to be a big reveal. And your character might get a little into the moment. And they're like, okay, yeah, I'm ready. Let's go. And the one player drops the bomb. And then the other player reacts really in character. They are angry, screaming and shouting at the other character. And the player feels those emotions. The players around the table hear this argument that seems to be building. And some players begin to feel uncomfortable. One of the biggest things I have learned with role playing games like this, with Dungeons and Dragons and the like, is you can build a really great scene where two characters are getting very emotional and very volatile in a scene, where there's a lot of anger, resentment, sadness, or anything like that building up. But sometimes a lot of that can bleed over, especially for people who are really experienced with acting, performing, or playing a lot of role playing games. They can find themselves taking a lot of their characters' emotions onto themselves. This can lead to really great character moments. This allows a player to really speak through their character, to really build up the scene, and to give it an edge of realism in it. But when you open that connection, you also open it up for the hurt and anger that's going to come through. So this is where I want to talk about my third section, one that is really important and kind of heavy. And yeah, Martial can play into volatility and emotionalness, is a reminder of reality and an expectation for actions to take. One of the number one things I think players should keep in mind if they're going for a scene that they can plan out that's going to be very emotional is letting people know. Telling the other involved player can help both of you have the right expectations and reactions. And as you both get more intense and start getting into character and yelling at each other, there'll be a moment where people, the DM and those involved in the scene, might realize everyone else at the table was not prepared for this. There can be a concern that players are shouting at each other instead of their characters. And there can be instances where what starts as a character argument turns into a player argument. The first thing to keep in mind when emotions run hot, volatile, or high at all in the game is establishing reality. That is beautiful, Little Pink. Enforcing the fourth wall. When asked to make a character, especially for first time players, a lot of the instinct can be to make yourself. Not necessarily to fully make you in the D&D world, but to take elements of yourself, of your personality, to put into the character, to give them some realism, to make them easier to role play as. But this can also open up dangerous avenues. When other characters criticize certain behaviors or don't react in the way you want the friends you're playing with to react, even if it's in character, can feel like a betrayal, can feel painful if you're too connected to those moments. So the number one thing I want to say is, especially when it comes to emotions, volatility in characters, is to have a way to remind yourself of reality. Have a way to step back. Find the level of veil you are comfortable with. People I've played with and people I know are really good of having a super thin veil, of making a character that reflects a lot of themselves, but also being entirely chill with them being criticized. With, oh, I made a character who, like me, is really really has these certain flaws. These are flaws I acknowledge in myself, and I'm totally down to tear them apart because I recognize them as my flaws, and I want a character who experiences the problems with them. But there are also people, and you have to look at yourself for this, who aren't good, who aren't happy with a thin veil when negative emotions come towards it. If you put a lot of yourself into a character and then those behaviors are not reinforced by the world, if they're criticized by the party, anything like that, if a thin veil is just going to lead to pain, you need to know that. You need to know that hearing your friend's voice coming out of a character's mouth feels too real to you. Are D&D players really that emotional and delusional? Not to generalize, but that's what I'm getting at. So, Marcial, what I'm going to say is this is a conversation about the most emotionally dangerous thing. Not, like I said, a lot of people are really good with a thin veil, are really good for basically putting themselves out there to be criticized, to be torn down in a way, and are entirely separated from their character. They do not mind it at all. There are people, though, that aren't comfortable with that, aren't good with that, and can be put in a spot where it is too much that they didn't consider beforehand. And so this is just basically a big reminder, PSA, thing to keep in mind is to know what level of reality you need to have, what steps you need to take to step away from the character and to not take the emotions from the game with you into real life. With that, some actions I just want to talk about to keep in mind is an action you can always take if you're playing a game with friends is to ask everything to cease, to stop. You need this moment to end. You are feeling too connected to it. You know nobody's actually coming after you, but right now, your stupid mirroring brain is hearing your friends' voices saying these things, and you need a moment to stop. If at any point you don't feel like you can stop a session, that is a problem as both a player and a DM. If things are hitting you, you need to stop it. Next up, an action is always feeling comfortable to talk with people about what the problems are to feel out if they are resolvable. A lot of people will put things away afterwards, telling themselves it's just a game. It's just a game. And while they're feeling these emotions, they're feeling upset, they will simply say it's just a game. They shouldn't feel upset and not acknowledge the fact that they do and that they need to do something about it. Have you ever met such an emotion? So Martial, I'm gonna say, that's people are different. People have very different levels of emotional connection, empathy, disassociation, and the like. That just being prepared is more of a thing. It's I'm gonna have to really think of the best way to respond. Some people are just a lot more emotionally connected to things. Some people get really attached when they make something. If you make a character, you can feel really attached to them. This can feel bad when this character fails at something. If you roll a 1, it feels like your character failed. The thing you made failed. And some people are really good with rolling with that. It's just a game or not being attached to it. But some people feel really attached to things they created. And that can feel worse when instead of feeling like the character failed, feeling like the character isn't liked, is disliked, is criticized, is when you start feeling like what you built it wrong, is where things can start to become a lot more raw and emotional for people. Then you can take that even one more step up of thinking about, Martial, if you made a bit of artwork and everyone came at you telling you just criticism, just the ways you made it wrong, there is going to be some raw emotional reaction to it. Even if it's not meant as a criticism of you, or even if they loved the work, but there was something they wanted to criticize, it's something that can stick pretty hard to people. So then when you take it that one more layer up, and it is your friends now, and it feels like your friends are criticizing how you made something that is really important to you, can take things that final step to feeling too emotionally real. Now, I think it is fair to say that there is a level of emotional vulnerability that is uncommon, irregular, and is fair enough to say, oh, I didn't think someone would be that attached to a fake character they made. And it's honestly legitimately understandable to have the reaction of, it seems a bit ridiculous to be that attached. But it's just something to keep in mind. If you're going to be playing role playing games with a lot of people you've never met, don't know, or just a wide swath of games across a wide swath of time, it's likely you will play with someone who is more emotionally attached to things than you are used to or expect. And knowing what to look out for or what actions to suggest can be really valuable in those moments. So you're Darness. I've met many emotional people, but as we know, I could care less. people in general could be weak-minded. Damn. All right. I mean, fair enough, I guess. How do I get the other players to fuck my weird frog for patron reasons? Oh, Lotus. Like I said, build expectations, plan the scene with people in advance, and make sure everyone's comfortable with the emotions that will come up with fucking your frog in the eyes of God. But I need those to the deal falling damage to myself. God damn, y'all. And so the final action I just want to keep in mind for everybody, one that I think does always exist in the back of people's mind, but is something that is hard to discuss, is knowing that at any moment you can tell the other players or discuss with the DM a desire to step away from the game, to leave, stop playing, change characters, or anything else you can do if things are not up to your expectation. You're not having fun with the game anymore. Your expectation for a more story or less story driven game are not being met, or emotionally playing with your friends with the type of story that's happening is too much. Being able to simply say to yourself, all right, I I need to stop playing. I need to stop playing this game with this raw of emotion with people because it's just too much. There's a lot of reasons to need to step away from a game, and just keeping in mind at all times that that is an action you can legitimately take at any time is important and valuable. And with that, we've kind of gotten to the end of everything I really had scheduled today. Congratulations, you have all graduated and passed our learning to play D&D stream. You all understand now what a role-playing game is. Collaborative storytelling, a game in a fantasy world driven between action and role-playing scenes. You understand the most basic mechanical actions a character can play: movement, acting, free actions, reactions, a fifth one that I can't remember in this moment. You guys have learned a bit about building characters, how to start building a character. That you don't necessarily start with mechanics unless they're really what you're into. You start with an idea and start building from there. You've learned the actual mechanics of filling out a character sheet to a degree and how to make a corn mancer. And today we discussed the things that go into truly starting and playing a collaborative storytelling game. Building a session zero, establishing expectations, collaborating with other people to make scenes, and to find out where you are comfortable in that veil between reality and character, and what actions you can take to help with these. With that, congratulations, you are all graduated. For the last chunk of the stream, I want to just tell D&D stories. Not like a big story time type thing, but just sort of chat with you guys, tell you guys some of my D&D stories, and let you guys post up any D&D stories you have or stories you love to tell. If you have a favorite horror story that you weren't involved in, feel free to post that up and I will read that as well. We are just celebrating our completion of my little tutorial on how to play Dungeons and Dragons. Damn it, I really wanted to copy that, Eric. Fucking your frog in the eyes of God. Damn Milk. Did your party make it through the MILF Manor, Eric? I kept forgetting to ask. Yes, they survived the heist at the Milford Estate. If you guys want to know a bit of that story, let me know, and I don't mind letting you guys know a bit of what happened there. Look, a lot of the issues being described is not going to happen every time. Yes, little pig. So a lot of the issues are not going to happen every time, just occasionally. I'm saying what to be prepared for and what sort of things can be helpful in those situations. The Cornmancer, there to show us that cornfields are awesome. Hell yeah. Who graduated top of the class? Top of the class, I give to Little Pink Bowser. I'm sorry, y'all, but Little Pink fucking, I don't know. Their brain is too big. They learned my made up fantasy language in one stream. They're the one putting out all these answers to questions that you guys have in chat before I even get to explaining them. Little Pink, congratulations. You're valedictorian or whatever the fuck it is. I got in trouble and I ate in the last row. So not me for sure. Oh, I'm sorry, Marcial. It's a good question, just one that is interesting to broker. One true Galeric. Nice. Dang, I'm late. Yeah, sorry, Cleric. We will have the VOD up, of course, but I'm afraid we're at the end of class time, so you're gonna have to go to the principal's office and explain your absence. Hey, Lotus? Nice. V? Nice. I cheated though. Don't give me a credit. I decline. No, Little Pink. You have no option here. No choice. Oh, and it looks like we got a story, actually. I guess I'll start with one of your guys' stories then. Well, then. I played an evil character in the Save the City story. The GM knew they were evil. The other players knew they were not good, per se, but didn't know they were evil. So, there was always suspicion around them. I did play them to be a problem for the party, but as someone who was there for their own advancement. The big reveal was that post-game story beats with what the character did afterwards was that they took their reward in the form of abandoned land that came with a fort. Damn, dude, you're really selling your party under the bridge for a fucking castle. Fucking respect, though. I respect that. Most of us here probably cheated. Actually, sir, I'm not late. You're just early. Really? Really? Okay. Wizards always show up right when they mean to. Okay. So, what's a good story? A great story I can actually tell for having consistent expectations. Now, this doesn't mean everyone in the party has to be 100% on the same page, but having the players or characters that interact the most have the same expectations for a scene is really great for scenes. So, years ago, for a friend's birthday, we ran a really quick one-shot session. We were told ahead of time it'd be really quick, kind of goofy at times, and so to play it however we kind of wanted. So we all went to our corners, made our characters individually, came back, and started playing. And the character I had made was a sorcerer who was blind as fuck. They had no eyes. They could not see whatsoever. Not only that, they didn't take any features, abilities, or spells that could assist them with sensing or perception. I made a character just to see what actually playing a character totally blind would be like. Now, an important moment in this campaign was us breaking into a manor that was on fire, and we needed to find someone who was trapped in a room before the building burnt down with them inside. Now, my blind character was excited to help, and of course offered to be in one of the groups searching. And the character he chose to go searching with was chosen because I knew both him and me had the exact same expectations for the scene. Because you see, the other character was a player who had built a fighter who had been true polymorphed into a horse. They built a character that no longer had player levels, could not speak common, could not fight properly, and was understated compared to everything else. I had a character who was 100% blind and had no abilities to make up for it, was based on ranged attacks, meaning they had to simply guess where things were. And the reason we chose to go searching a burning mansion together was because we had the same expectations for the scenes we were going to make. Namely, utterly ridiculous. What followed was 30 minutes of a blind man leading a horse through hallways, randomly stopping to check if he was at a section of the wall with a door, trying to get through the door, having the horse kick its way through the door, and then slowly searching empty room by empty room by hand to see if anyone was in there. We would be only ever cut back to for quick 1 minute sections while the other players were successfully doing things on other floor for the horse to say horse things and my blind character to make puns based around the fact that, well, I don't see anything, so I guess there's no one here. Until eventually the rest of the party had to come and rescue the horse and the blind man who had become trapped in a room after a door had swung closed behind them. Essentially, me and the other player had the most fun we could have had, barely being used and achieving nothing. Because all we wanted out of our scenes was absolute stupidity, which was achieved in spades. Oh, one true glare. Eric, I need some advice on how to play or role play a character I'm building. So, any subclass of Barbarian 3, Astral Monk X. Essentially, since you can substitute Wisdom for Strength or attack roll ability checks and saving throws using Astral, and the Rage does rage things. From what I see, the advantage to saving throws and checks still works raw, but the bonus Rage is damage is up to the DM for my Wisdom strikes. Wanted to play a grappling character using this. How would you RP such a character? So honestly, RP is going to be more so based around what kind of character they are and less around the mechanics of what you're doing. But I'll approach the mechanics kind of first. A couple of things to keep in mind, one true cleric, is that both the barbarian and the monk have unarmored defense, but both of their defenses are built around entirely different stats. For the barbarian, unarmored defense is determined by dexterity and constitution, whereas for the monk, unarmored defense is built around dexterity and wisdom. It sounds like you're really wanting to do stuff with wisdom here, but that's also going to pull away from the barbarian. Because while the barbarian is raging, they get bonus damage to strength-based weapons. So what this means is that if you're going for wisdom-based weapon usage, you're probably going to give up on bonus damage. This isn't a huge problem, because what I'm going to say is, as raging, that still makes you tanky as fuck. And I have made a dexterity barbarian in the past just to get 20 AC, resistance to all damages, and to just sit in front of my party and tank without dealing damage. I think that could be really fun. But just a couple of things to keep in mind mechanically for your character. Another suggestion I'm going to say for any barb is I would say choose one of two barbarian subclasses. With Astral Monk, I think you could have a ton of RP fun doing Ancestral Guardian Barbarian. Ancestral Guardians are based around summoning up spirits from the past to help defend themselves and their allies. And I think in later levels, even to attack. So with an Astral Monk that's already using projection, pulling on the spirit and the soul, I think an ancestral barbarian can lead to some really cool story and RP ideas where you can flavor it one way or the other, where actually your monk is pulling on the spirits of their ancestors that are scattered in the stars in the sky. Or you can go the other way, saying instead of your ancestors, the barbarian abilities are just you expanding your soul outwards to defend your allies. I think once you know whether you're wanting to be about the astral monk's idea of expanding their soul or an ancestral monk's idea or ancestral barbarian's idea of calling on spirits, will really help you know how to roleplay your character. Are they someone really concerned about their own soul, their own considerations of the world, meditating on each thing that occurs? Or are they someone who's really bound up in history, legacy, honor? My power comes from my family. Everything I do is to honor them, to live up to their expectations, and to one day join them. Those can really help you build the type of RP you want to do. But those are the two directions I would be most likely to play them, as a very either individualist, spiritual person who every time something happens, they pause, they think and meditate on it, thinking about how they feel, how those around them feel, and how best to react in small, powerful moments. The other way is to play a very honor bound and ancestral being, one who has very strict rules they live by because they know they will be judged by their ancestors. Their ancestors are always with them. There's always an external force that they are tackling and managing. That can be interesting for party that this runs friction with, where party members are like, no, you are more than what your ancestors expect of you. Or it can be really good for someone who says, no, I cannot do this thing, for my ancestors would not accept it. Again, it's one of those moments that might be restrictive or not, but I think those are the two directions I would most think of role playing a character built around those mechanics. Actually, I can show off. Maybe I'll show them off, or I'll just kind of look at it and tell you guys about it. So, the character I had made that I was talking about, which was a pure barbarian that I built around dexterity. Essentially, what I wanted to see is how much of an AC I could get level 1 on a character. And I had kind of a visualization of characters from like Vikings, Last Kingdom in mind. You know, characters that wouldn't exist historically, but like they have two weapons in their hand and they run around the battlefield laughing and taunting and dodging and parrying and just sort of that kind of mix of brutality and skill. So I had that in mind when I started building the character. And so I made sure to max out dexterity and constitution to give them as high of an AC as possible. I rolled really well, so I had a character who had an 18 AC. Then in my mind, I was like, so what else do I imagine for these types of characters? And I saw the pair of swords in each hand just kind of being that like high skill but brutality energy. And so because they were dexterity and I wanted, dexterous weapons, I went around, I found a feat called Dual Wielder, which gives you a +1 to your AC while you have a weapon in each hand, pushing them up to a starting AC of 19. Finally, I looked ahead for something else I would want, which was called Defensive Duelist, which would allow you to use your reaction to add essentially another +3 to your AC for one attack. And so I wanted to flesh out this character. So they're dodging, they're dexterous. I really like the idea of them being taunting the enemy and laughing the whole time. So instead of entering a rage, I just imagine it as like a battle frenzy, but one where instead of yelling and roaring, they're just laughing, like almost like a jet, like if you imagine a jester warrior, someone that's just taunting people as they laugh and spin and deflect attacks and dodge and take a shot on the chest and laugh about it. Just sort of this battle joy that they fall into. And so I had to build the character more so from there. So, what type of character is this Viking that is joyous during fights, that is laughing and taunting and always at the center to tank for people? And I was like, well, that's someone that is, first of all, ready to die. That's someone that accepts that they are going to die on the battlefield. That's also someone who's clearly really culturally built into battle and fighting and honor, and just sort of this idea that they're taunting others for not quite being better than them. So I made a character that was essentially in exile. This was a Viking who had been exiled from their island. They had killed someone during a duel because they had lost themselves to their rage. And now they were sent to the mainland to find an honorable death. The only redemption they can have is dying in a battle against an opponent who is better than them. Because of this, they hone their skills. They have to find the best fight possible, so they have to be the best fighter possible to get into the right situation. They can't die to just anyone. It has to be the best. They're so bound up in this culture and belief that they just throw themselves head first into it. But also, they were exiled for the reason of their rage, the key feature of being a barbarian. So they had spent their life changing that, to never lose control, to never dishonor themselves again. They have changed their blood rage into a battle joy, laughter and taunting and dancing about the battlefield will keep them at the top condition, will allow them to access that resistance to pain, that ability to avoid damage, while not getting them lost to seeing red, allowing them to maintain control towards the goal of joy and honorable death. So that is a character that I started very mechanically of how high of an AC can I get on a barbarian, then building a character that I wanted to play that would match up with what those mechanics basically allow and encourage. A character that has a warrior's culture and a barbarian style, but isn't trying to brutally hack during a fight. Someone that is ready to die and throws themselves with their full potential into a fight, but takes immense pleasure in it and isn't afraid of it and knows that this is exactly where they want to be. Oh, man. Oh, shit. Yeah, yeah. Someone who's ready to die and is not upset about it, being rash enough to test if anyone could take him up on the offer. Hell yeah, little pink. Ah, man. So, any other good stories or questions out there? Honestly, like I said, we'd kind of gotten through the main things I wanted to. I could definitely try to rack my brain for some more interesting stories to tell you guys, but I also love this moment for answering any more questions you guys have. I know normally when I get into my D&D streams, I tend to go pretty, well into the rhythm of it and have to do questions later. So if there's anything you guys want to say, have seen, or ask, but One True Cleric. As much flack as the game gets, League's lore is really neat. Their character is similar to what you described, known as Olaf. Yeah. is a brutal Viking warrior who visited a seer and gave him a vision of the future, one of them dying of old age, and he hated the idea, went off on a journey to die in glorious combat. Yeah, Olaf, motherfucker. Bullshit character being immune to CC. Why tell stories where you could play Slime Rancher? God damn it. +$1. Hey, Lotus. Nice. I just want to say that you have intrigued me for the deeply psychological aspect of D&D. Okay, Martial. It's interesting. Just this idea of like interacting with both characters and players at the same time. The idea that a lot of people are more or less emotional than you would expect when it comes to that, or another feature. Like, what do you mean, Martial? League's lore is good. What some people don't like about it is that it has changed and been retconned over the years, and it will continue to change. If you want to know what I don't like, I fucking hate Shaco's current lore. You might be like, hey, how could you hate fucking demon possessed doll Jack in the Box dude? That's pretty fine, right? That's not what his official lore is anymore. If you go look at his lore page on League of Legends, it's like 2 sentences with like, yeah, I think he was a toy and he kills people. Uh-oh. That's all the fuck that it is. And they keep giving everybody VGUs and lore updates and shit. And they're scared. They're scared to talk about Shaco is what I think it is. And they refuse to go into his lore and give him anything to work with. And it's sad and it's depressing. And the greatest thing I've ever heard was someone who's like, you know what they should do for his lore? It'd be like, we didn't make him. We don't know how he got here. And then that's just the explanation for how he can clone himself to make more of him, how he just goes invisible and disappears and teleports and shit, is that he's just breaking the game. The Shaco is a virus in League of Legends, and you can't get rid of him. Yeah, Milkblade, Shaco's a glitch. Oh, darness. Eric, I've been suffering from DS3 for a while now. But this conversation is keeping me from going on a blood rage. So thanks. Well, darness, though, is that redeem for yourself? Darness, do you need me to say something, Darness? Did you get this redemption because you wanted me to say I'm sorry you're suffering? I'm glad to hear you're not blood raging, Darness. And also Ara Ara. I loved the old Ziggs lore. I used to have a story where he tried to be the inventor, but everything he made exploded. So he started making things that were supposed to explode. When he tried to join the Yordle Academy, he was rejected until he saved Heimerdinger from being kidnapped. Now he's a glorified vandal of Zaun. Yeah, nah. I'm very interested to see what the upcoming fucking Chem Baron is going to be like. She's got some interesting abilities, so I'm pretty down to see what her lore is. I did the RR redeem because you kept telling me not to use it just for message. You son of a bitch. You're just out here trying to be an angsty little counter boy, aren't you? God, nah. Honestly, if I can just to get topic back onto D&D for a little bit. What's always been an interesting thing for me in campaigns and stuff, and I know fucking Lotus, you're out there and ready to tell your own side of this, but one of the most interesting thing about making characters with certain alignments is you very quickly learn a little bit about yourself and what you feel comfortable and uncomfortable playing. For example, I always make characters that are lawful. Lawful neutral is one of my favorites to think about because it's such a strange alignment to consider. Lawful evil is always fun because you get to do a little bit of selfishness, but you got your code to stick by. And I think actual lawful good and not the lawful stupid are great things to do. But a thing I could never play, something I could never get my mind into, is the mental concept of a chaotic character. A character without a code or rules they live by, someone that just does things to do them with no reasoning to it, no underlying goal, utterly befuddles me to no end. I'm the type of person that there are rules. You follow them so that other people follow them. If you hate the rule, that doesn't matter. You'd likely hate what other people are going to do without the rule more than you hate the rule. And so I'm always playing lawful characters because I'm a very lawful person, I think. I like knowing what to expect, what people are going to do. If I give my word I will do something, then I will do it. I don't understand breaking a promise because lol. The line between lawful good and awful good is hard if you aren't sure what you're doing. Definitely. Definitely, definitely. Onion will probably be chaotic. Yeah, Onion seems chaotic to me. Tempted to make this monk barb a lawful good after your ideas for it. Definitely could be. But there can also be very selfish reasons or very neutral reasons to do it. I think a number one thing to talk about, Galeric, is to talk with your DM about what their expectations for good, evil, lawful, and chaotic are, because a lot of DMs have different ideas about it. Example for me, I like to think of good and evil more so in this idea of selfish and selfless. Kind of this idea of ends and means sort of thing. If your ends are going to be selfish, then no matter what, it's an evil alignment. If your ends are in spite of your own wishes, then that's going to be good, essentially. And if you find yourself kind of in the middle ground of the two, that tends to be neutral. And then your means are where you kind of get into this lawful, chaotic sort of thing. Will you set rules for yourself and keep to them no matter what? Are those the means by which you pursue your goals? And if there is nothing that guides your means, if the ends are the ultimate justification and everything else will be used to get to it no matter what, that's sort of where the chaotic comes to it. But even more so, that's actually the danger of the neutral when you look at lawful and chaotic. Chaotic is impulsive. It is a rejecting of rules, meaning, to quote Captain Jack Sparrow, dishonest people you can always trust to be dishonest. However, a neutral character, someone who is neither bound by the rules or bound to reject the rules, is someone who has nothing that binds them. They are free to selflessly pursue anything because they are unbound. What I think the most dangerous type of character is a neutral evil character. A character that will bend, break, use, and abuse everything for the sake of themselves at all other expense. Similarly, some of the most common villains, or most popular villains, I think, are actually neutral good. The character that will do anything for what they see as the greater good, the thing that needs to happen no matter the cost, no matter what rules need to be imposed or broken, ignored, or undermined. Everything will serve the greater good, whether that benefits me or not, is a neutral good. And that is kind of the way I tend to think of them. But everyone else has their own impressions. So if you're ever building your alignment, speak with your DM about what their expectations and perception of it is to make sure you can actually build in align with their alignments. Never feel like an alignment would be wanted to be worked with or would last very long at a party trying to achieve something more than getting a paycheck. Oh, Marcial. For me, it is that I am no stranger of cooperative play. Since I volunteer in German Disaster and Control, I also play with Destiny Clan for many years. It's maybe that these situations, team play and success is the utmost important goal. Fun in the raid, for example, as well, but at the end, it's about victory. So a role play with emotional spikes is something else entirely. Okay, yeah. It's definitely a very different form of play, simply because what you're playing at is a story instead of playing at the mechanics. That is definitely a thing that happens when you come from video games or traditional game formats into role-playing games, is this realization that you're not playing at the mechanics, you're playing at the story, at the players, at the characters. Onion has one goal, and that is to increase the amount of frog legs he is in possession of. What if it's a bad promise? And like, what the fuck? This guy's got me kicking kids while Yodi on frog legs? That's not fair. Be giving me gold, so come here, little Jimmy. Gotta break those knees? Fuck. Yeah, well, that's just it. A truly lawful character, would be of one of two ideas. They would either not give their word to do it, or if they gave their word to do something that goes directly against their code or beliefs, then they were lying. They were never going to do it. They might have told them they would do it to get out of a death or like either you do this or you die. Okay, I'll do it. Let me go and I'll get right on that. That's someone that is, they're lawful. They know they're not going to do it and they're lying to not die. That doesn't make you not lawful. It makes you practical. But the lawful person is the person that knows whether they will or won't do this, essentially. Does this align with my beliefs or not? It's at least the way I tend to see lawful. Got an unhappy knight that is played as a lawful neutral, basically regrets following any order he gets. Yeah. So I imagine though, Mortis, like that type of a knight is someone who basically sees my duty is the most important thing. If I don't follow my duty, the world falls apart in some way. People don't believe in knights anymore. People will abuse the position or others. Even if I hate the orders I'm given, if I fail to follow them, I might be able to do a small amount of good or feel better. But ultimately, the rules are what I see as keeping things in order. And to break them will cause more harm than me following them. Another great example, the Viking I talked about, who is dedicated to dying because of his exile, because he failed, because that is his culture, is a true lawful. They are not you can say there's selfish and selfless elements to what they're doing, but ultimately their beliefs, their behaviors, everything is guided by the rules they have set for themselves and the rules the culture has set for them. So they are more controlled by their means, really, than by the ends. What would you describe as true neutral then? True neutral. God. A true neutral. So someone unbounded by ends or means. Someone that is willing to use whatever is available to them to achieve ultimately neutral goals. What I think I would have to describe for the neutral alignment when it comes to good or evil is anybody that is unsure of their wishes, of their desire. Someone who doesn't know whether they want to be selfish or selfless from moment to moment, essentially. They're going to do a lot of neutral good and neutral evil things because this is someone who essentially doesn't know what exactly they want. They might be figuring it out, they might have an idea, or they might not know at all and are trying out a few things. Another thing to keep in mind is that an alignment is not a set thing. An alignment is a measurement of where someone is in a moment or in an action, but most characters' alignments will change over time in one way or another, especially if they start neutral in things. I think that's the most likely time that an alignment is going to shift in one direction or another, especially if they're neutral between good and evil. It's kind of the slow decision of what is it that they want. They'll likely to slide in one direction or another, or they might have a feeling of a need for balance of if I'm selfish, then I can be selfless. If I'm selfless, then I can be selfish. And they're just sort of maintaining a balancing act, essentially, to be more so okay with themselves than okay with what's happening in the wider world. Uh, Evil person, essentially, I guess selfish is too simple, is selfish at the cost of others. As opposed to, I guess, a neutral person could be selfish but doesn't want to cost others things, essentially. They don't necessarily want to give things to others, but they also don't want to cost others, essentially. I suppose that'd be the way I'd think about it. So I think a code of beliefs thing means that a sane minded, chaotic character can't truly exist. I'm already a little hesitant to say that. So a chaotic character, so a character who feels bounded to sort of resist rules, both on themselves and on others. I don't know if you would call them. They would definitely seem insane to lawful people, is the way I would say it. But this is someone that essentially doesn't establish a consistent code of beliefs. This is someone who measures each action, each moment entirely separately from past moments, essentially. This isn't someone that'll look at the past and see, oh, well, I've helped peasants every time in the past, so I should help peasants again. This is someone who looks at a moment and basically says, what what can be done to achieve my goal here? What can I do to be unbounded in this moment? Let's see what. Let me take a second. I'm gonna look. There's quite a selection of YouTube channels that you can go to that kind of break down their own opinions of the difference between lawful, good, chaotic, evil, and all that. And again, and all these are very personal at the end of the day. There are some things that are similar to each other, but let's see, what is chaotic good? I think is the best one for me to look for. Yeah, so I guess the one that's kind of given, and I guess I'm not very familiar with the comics of it, but one person I tend to go to a lot when I try to think about alignments, one of their favorite chaotic good would be Hellboy, who is a character who you could see doesn't want to hurt people. They want to cause as much good in the world as possible. They're willing to sacrifice a lot of themselves for that good. but also the way they approach life and how they act isn't bounded in a way. It is very moment to moment. They will let certain demons or beings that kill and eat people go because they've given information and it's not important right now. They will also break into fights for no particular reason because they're upset that day or anything like that. They're not bounded by a set of rules and beliefs as much as they are being guided by their desire to do good at that core. They aren't going to set rules for themselves or for others in the way that a neutral or lawful would do. They're very bounded up. They are more defined by their desire to do good and to not be bound down at the same time. Don't mess with me, lady. I've been drinking with skeletons. Hell yeah. I'd argue that hedonism is a code of belief, is the belief that I deserve everything I want. Fuck. God damn. That isn't really what hedonism is. Hedonism is more, I want to maximize my happiness, which can encompass helping others or simply self gratification at the cost of others. Joe Cat is my favorite video for. Joe Cat is nice. Judge Dredd is also, in my honest opinion, best example of lawful neutral. Hmm. Definitely at the beginning, 100%. But that is the other thing to remember about alignments. Alignments are meant to be challenged. No character should be their alignment in every moment. A chaotic character should, when faced with a dark scene, consider and maybe even perform something up to a code of beliefs. Maybe it's not their own. Maybe it's the lawful character in their party mentioning their code of beliefs. And in that moment, the chaotic character going, all right, I can take that one rule into my life. I'm not going to build out a system of rules or a system of beliefs to follow, but that one is fine. Just like a lawful character, many times in their life, should feel their rules being challenged, threatened, and consider needing to bend or break them. Good characters should be tempted to do evil in a good story, and evil characters should be constantly doing good things to keep up appearances. Though it's also great when evil characters, particularly lawful ones, are faced with moments that they simply consider giving something up for someone, the one person they care about, the group that they feel bad for, if only for a moment. All alignments shouldn't be monolithic. They should be maybe monolithic in the way you build or have the default reaction for your character to be. But in any really challenging or thought provoking or any moment where you would start thinking about the ethics or belief of your character, your alignment should almost go out the window. Or you could say they start from the foundation of lawful neutral. Now let's think about their ethics. Should immediately make any monolithic belief not stand up to standard, essentially. Would knights or samurai be lawful neutral since their main duty is not to a moral system but a crown or lord, assuming the royalty themselves are relatively neutral or have good intentions? By default, I would say, yeah, Galeric. Knights, samurai, at least like the idea of them, would start very lawful neutral. Now, each individual knight might have a good leaning an evil leaning, might be the rebellious boy that occasionally dabbles into chaos, or might be pretending to be lawful when actually they're neutral. They don't care or believe in these laws, rules, or codes, but will throw them out the window. Another thing to keep in mind is lawful characters aren't defined by an external system of rules and laws, but more so by an internal one. Most will internalize external rules. Knights and samurai will internalize the rules given to them, the orders given to them, but it is only when it becomes internalized that it is their alignment. If it's entirely external, then it exists outside of their beliefs. What if a character is unfeeling, unthinking, magical monolith of celestial energy? Do they have goals, Crank and Lever? If a character has no goals and no beliefs, I would consider that a rock or a stick. Unaligned. How's that? Chicken nuggets. Yeah, that character is chicken nuggets. Alrighty, y'all. Thank you so much for letting me go off at the end there, just talking about alignment, stories, lore, and how build characters. I hope you all had some fucking fun today. I know we covered some heavier topics, some lighter topics, but I hope you all had an enjoying stream and all feel like you know a bit more about how to get started and how to play a fucking D&D game, yeah? Lord, are you guys making Pickle Rick jokes right now? Yeah, that's definitely a sign we need to end this fucking stream. Alright, yeah, no, the Pickle Rick jokes are coming out. Well, in that case, I know exactly where I'm sending you all. Thank you so much for coming out and having fun with me. I really enjoyed today, and I hope you all are looking forward to whatever comes next. I have no clue what my next D&D stream is going to be, so have fun with that fucking shit. But for now, thank you. Have a good weekend, everybody. And I hope to see you all again real soon. Now I'm going to take you on out to one of my favorite fucking tardigrade VTubers. That's right, there's another one. And she's out here building models for people. So you all better go, even if you have to go do some shit. All of you are joining the raid and saying you love her before you sign off to the night. You got that? You mother, I see only 15 of you ready to raid. At least one of you is missing out there. So one of you better be ready to join this raid. All right. Wait, is there another tardy? Yeah, y'all, we're going to go see another tardy artist. So get your asses ready. I'll post something up in the chat. 1 second. All right, y'all, copy this. Copy that shit. And get ready. Because we are out.
Hey, pretty lady, you're looking real fine. This is our first date. I'm not like other guys. I can tell that you have played it safe your whole life. So let's get naughty and break a couple rules tonight. Sneaking a movie, no one will ever know. Then run on private property and hold each other close. Beneath the moonlight, I've got a fun idea. Lean and kiss a cheek and gently whisper in your ear. Let's seal the car tonight. Commit a felony with me and drive until the sunrise. Let's seal the motherfucking car tonight. Young and alive. See, let's commit some crime. Picasso's